All right, what's up, everybody? So I got the new fretboard glued on. It's still wet glue, but hopefully you can see. Can you see it in there? It's much lighter. I'll show it to you after I take the clamps off. I got the headstock veneered. I got the new shape cut. Pretty sexy. Still got a little bit of sanding to do on that top edge right there. And I got that battleship look I was talking about, where that circle is. I am not going to drill that circle all the way through the headstock. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drill down about 1/4 inch, and then I'll put like a dark epoxy resin in there, probably a blue, and then I'll put the initials in that, and then I'll bury them in a clear, and that will memorialize the initials that the owner wants put somewhere on this guitar. But I'm very excited about the new fretboard. It looks so much better already. I love when you're done tearing down and you get to start putting back together. I've got one more operation to do on this guy here for the shaping of the guitar right here. So I just put a bunch of relief cuts in there, and I'll probably just knock them out with my chisel, and then I'll go out to the spindle sander and smooth that over. And what I'll do is I'll only come over to close to the neck, and I don't want to touch that binding. So I want to stay a little bit away from the binding, and then I'll sand that out by hand. Now, I do have to dig out the old binding, but a nice sharp chisel and utility knife to get into that one. The rest of it I'll just go around with an iron, and it pops right off. That's pretty easy. I've got to clean up these cavities. The paint on here and the finish on here is so thick. I don't want to keep putting coats on top of coats on top of coats. Right now this is already too thick. Like, it feels thick, right? But luckily I have a template that fits this, and I can just drop my router in there, and I'll double stick tape the template on there, and then I'll drop my router in there, and I'll clean this up. And then for the inside, I'll get a big drill bit, and I'll wrap sandpaper around the drill bit, and I'll just go around and clean that up so there's no paint in there. This one here, I have like 3 different templates for this control cavity cover, and none of them fit this. So I'm either going to have to make a template, or I could possibly go in there with the Dremel and clean that out. Same thing with the walls. It's pretty caked on the side walls, but to do that, I'll put a bearing, a top bearing, on a router bit that's a 1/2 mil smaller than the cutting blade, and that'll cut a 1/2 mil deep into this paint. And then I'll change the bearing back to a similar, the same size bearing, and then I'll drop it down for the bottom half of it. So I'll do the top half a 1/2 mil deep, and then I'll switch the bearing, and then I'll do the bottom half, and that'll make them flush, and it'll take care of all that paint there. For all this top paint right here, I'm either going to have to go in there with my Dremel, or sometimes just a flat piece of wood, something flat with a piece of sandpaper, and do it by hand. Luckily there's not a lot of paint on the bottom here, so that'll be easy. I have a little tiny wire brush that goes on the Dremel, and I could do the bottom of it with that. So, it doesn't have to be beautiful in there. It's not a paint surface, but I definitely want to get rid of all that excessive finish in there. I got the pickup I got this one all cleaned out. I still got to clean this one out. And here's the big uh-oh that I came across with this. So see the line? These are the post holes for the bridge, and these are the post holes for the stop tail. See the line, how it comes right to the edge of the hole? And then see the line over there, how it misses the hole. Now, on the camera, okay, that's better. Okay. It's off center. It's not way off center. I've seen worse, right? And had to move them. This is just a little over the edge of safe, right? It's a little past where I would feel comfortable sending it home. If it's 2 millimeters off, that means I'd have to move it 1 millimeter in the correct direction, right? If it's 1 millimeter too low towards, at the pickup, towards the treble side, and you're a heavy-handed player like me, you may have a tendency to pull that E string off the edge of the fretboard. Now on the nut end, it can be anywhere from 1.5 to 2 millimeters between the edge of the nut and the center of the first slot, right, for the string. Same thing on the base end, about 1.5, sometimes 2 mils. If you go 2 mils and 2 mils, then your strings are all closer together. I like to go 1.5 mils because it gives it just a little bit more space in there. Doesn't sound like much at all, but you'll feel a difference when you're trying to play an A chord and you're trying to cram 3 fingers in there. If you want that open E string and you wanted to cram 3 fingers in there instead of barring it, you'll feel a huge difference in there just with that extra 1 mil, 1/2 mil on one side, 1/2 mil on the other side. You'll feel a difference. You also have the thickness or width of the string to account for. So on the treble side, if you're 1.5 mils in to the center of the slot, then from the edge of the string to the edge of the fretboard is more than the edge of the string to the edge of the fretboard on your bass end, because the string is wider. So I've seen some people where they'll do 1.5 mils on the treble and 2 mils on the bass, and that's okay also. It gives it a nice clean look when you look down the string line with the edge of the fretboard, because you have the same space left between the edge of the string and the edge of the fretboard, instead of going from the center of the string to the edge of the fretboard. Okay, on the pickup end of the fretboard, you have more. There's more room for error up on that end, because the strings, as they run down the neck, between the edge of the string and the edge of the fretboard gets wider and wider as you go down, because you got 42 mils down here and you got 52 or 54 mils up here on the bridge. So when you get to this part of the fretboard, the string is further in from the edge and further in from the edge than it is down on the nut side. So that gives you a little bit of room for the bridge to be off one way or the other way. But if you've only got like 2 mils or 2.5 mils, usually it's somewhere between like 2 and 3 mils that you got between the edge of the string and the edge of the fretboard. So if I'm going from 2 mils of clearance down to 1 mil of clearance on the treble end of this, that's not enough. that's going to give me the same clearance between the string and the edge of the fretboard that I have at the nut. Now down on that end, the nut slot is going to prevent the string from coming off the edge of the fretboard. But right at the 12th fret, where the string has the most movement, if you're like me, you're going to stab that E string with your ring finger, and you're going to pull it right off the edge of the fretboard. And that's not something I'm willing to send home to the customer. Like, here, it's fixed. Just when you play, be careful that you don't pull the string off because it's too close to the edge. I can fix it, and now's the time to fix it. But because it's right on the border of, do I really got to fix it, or could I get away with it? What I'll do is I'll put a bridge and a nut on this guitar just the way it is now, minus the clamps, and I'll put my 2 E strings on it, and I'll see, or I'll just use, like, sometimes I'll just use a rubber band. I'll run the rubber band through the holes where the tuning machines go, and put a little stick on the back, and I'll pull 2 rubber bands down, and I'll lay them across the slots in the saddles for the 2 E strings, and I'll see, without the posts being in, and I'll just line it up with the holes, and I can slide it back and forth, and I can see if the clearance is okay. I don't think it's gonna be. I think it's just a little bit past where, like the safety margin there. So I think I'm gonna wind up having to plug the holes and move them by 1 millimeter. Okay. That sounds like a lot of work to do for 1 millimeter, right? But it's not right, and I can make it right, and now is the time to make it right. I'm never going to have another opportunity to fix this, so it's fix it now or live with it forever, or have the customer live with it forever. I don't want to do that to the customer, right? This guitar has sentimental value to the customer. There's no dollar value we can put on that to say, is it worth it to move it this far? Like, of course it is, right? It has sentimental value. It's therefore worth it. Now what that means is, anytime you put a plug in a guitar, that's where you're going to have finish. The finish is always going to crack around that plug. Always. It's always going to crack. If it's like a lacquer or a poly, especially a poly. But eventually it's going to crack because the plug is going to expand and contract at a different rate than the rest of the body of the guitar. That expansion and contraction is not going to let the finish remain unblemished around there. But those holes are right around the posts, so the posts probably going to cover any imperfections that later arise in the finish of this guitar. I'm not okay with that. I don't want that. It's like having a perfectly neat, organized kitchen and having a bunch of dirty dishes in the cabinets, right? Like, just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there, right? So I don't want that. So the finish that I'm going to put on this guitar means that I will not have to re-veneer this guitar, which is my only option, really. I mean, I can pull this veneer off the guitar, plug the holes, put a new veneer on, and then re-drill the holes in the correct place. That will give me one continuous piece of material for the finish to stick to, that the finish will not fracture, right? So I could do all that, right? And that's not, that may sound like a huge undertaking. It's really not. It's more work to get the veneer off the top of this guitar cleanly, and then make sure that your surface is the right shape for the new veneer. I don't even have a vacuum bag But I could re-veneer this guitar without having any problems. I could probably re-veneer this guitar right on top of this veneer, but I don't want all those layers of glue and veneer and glue and veneer. It makes it too soft and spongy on the top of the guitar. I don't want it. So this veneer has to come off and new veneer has to go on, or I can put a different finish on this guitar. I have a guitar over there that I did like, I think about 3 years ago with an epoxy resin finish on the entire guitar, minus the neck. So headstock, front of the guitar, back of the guitar, even the edges of the guitar have an epoxy resin finish. Now, epoxy resin doesn't always come up with that gloss that you may want for a nice, new finish look. So I lacquered it. So instead of using paint on the guitar, I just used epoxy resin, and then I just treated it like a painted guitar, and I sprayed it with lacquer, and I level sanded the lacquer. It's gorgeous. I'm going to do something similar on this guitar, but in the colors that the customer asked for. So that should be an exciting video, way better than this video. So I'm gonna finish my work over here. I've got all these relief cuts in here. I'll probably knock those out with a chisel, and then I'll go out to the spindle sander, and I'll only sand over to like right here, because I don't want to risk bumping the spindle sander up against the new fretboard. So then the rest of it I'll sand out by hand. I'll put some blue tape on the edge here, and I'll sand until I touch the blue tape, and then I'll take the blue tape off and I'll switch to a higher grit sandpaper, and I'll go right straight to the binding. I still got to take the rest of the binding off of here. That'll take less time than it takes the iron to heat up. I just get the iron and I put the tip of the iron on there, and I just go around. Sometimes I got the iron in one hand and I'm just slowly pulling the veneer or the binding off with the other hand, and sometimes I'll do like half the guitar and just pull it all off in one piece. But that's easy. I've got some binding laying around somewhere, and I think I'm gonna stay with that bone colored binding because I think it looks good. It's got the pearl inlay in the fretboard, and I really wanted to put some pearl on top of this guitar. It's going to make the blues, it's going to make them pop. So, okay, that's where we're at. Finally, starting to put stuff back together. A couple more operations here to finish up the tearing down of this before we're ready to start the finish. All right, so the cool part about that is that means that the mess part of this job is almost at an end. Yeah. Peace.